Welcome back to Charging Ahead, an exciting e-mobility video series by the Enzi Ijayo Africa Initiative showcasing the future of sustainable transport in Kenya. In this episode, we are joined by the President of E-Mobility Association of Kenya, Hezbon Mose, a key figure in shaping Kenya's electric mobility policies.
My name is Hezbon Mose. I am the country director for a company known as Ampersand, which does two-wheelers in the country. Swapping model, like we're in a charging station, we actually do swapping on batteries. We sell the motorcycle, we own the battery, and we do the swap model, which is a preferred model for the two-wheelers. I'm also the president for the E-Mobility Association of Kenya, where we have more than 30 companies registered in the association. And the role for the association is essentially advocating and growth of e-mobility in the country.
Could you expound on your role in Kenya's e-mobility policy task force?
My role in the e-mobility task force, that question is kind of broad. So first of all, the Ministry of Transport put together a task force to develop the e-mobility policy for the country, which I was part of that team, which was started in 2023, and they completed the work in 2024. So I was part of the team to develop the e-mobility policy, which is currently sitting at the cabinet waiting for approval. But also as EMAK, as the president, we've been basically working with the different government ministries to support and actually put our proposals for consideration with the government for providing fiscal and non-fiscal incentives for the e-mobility space in the country. So my role has been basically leading the organization in that capacity.
As someone who has contributed to Kenya's national e-mobility policy development and works closely with various stakeholders through EMAK, you have a unique vantage point on how collaboration and regulation shape Kenya's e-mobility landscape. So, from your perspective, why is collaboration between government, industry, and civil society important in shaping e-mobility policy?
The interesting thing about e-mobility, it touches on different ministries in the government. So you'll have Ministry of Health talking about carbon emission. We have Ministry of Transport, all EVs are actually on the road. We have Ministry of Industrialization, who are talking about how we can industrialize the country. We have Ministry of Environment, which talks about the environment. We have also National Treasury, which is actually, when we talk about fiscal and non-fiscal incentives, actually the National Treasury. So the collaboration between all the ministries, collaboration between the parastatals like EPRA and KPLC, is significant because they all contribute towards this e-mobility story that we're trying to grow in the country. So the collaboration and actually working together with all these key stakeholders in the government is critical for us to actually grow the industry, because every single ministry that I've mentioned is affected and actually contribute towards the e-mobility.
Were there any key policy gaps or challenges identified by the task force that still need to be addressed?
Yes. So when you look at e-mobility in the country today, we have slightly over 10,000 EVs in the country, meaning we have about 8,000 motorcycles, we have 53 buses, we have 300 passenger vehicles, and that contributes to that slightly over 10,000. And the gaps that we have and what was found in the task force, which the task force report and the policy highlights addressing those gaps, is key high-level gaps were, number one, e-mobility is not recognized in any of the policies or regulation in the country. So we are leveraging on ICE policies. So that was a key gap. And then number two, all over globally, there is incentives provided, both fiscal and non-fiscal, to EVs for actually to kickstart on the growth of EVs in the country. So those are the gaps that actually were being addressed in the policy, and the implementation of that policy will help in terms of addressing those gaps. And then when we looked at the legal framework, we found there was 31 laws that actually need to be changed for us to actually incorporate EVs into our policies and regulations.
How would you describe the Kenyan government's current role and level of commitment in supporting the e-mobility sector?
The government has been very supportive, and the reason why I say it's been very supportive is we have about 10,000 vehicles out of more than 3.2 vehicles in the country. From a percentage point, is actually 0.2% of the total volume of vehicles in the country. And from that perspective, and the government is very supportive in terms of giving incentives, which we got in 2023. We are basically being called to propose different changes that actually we need to enable the growth of EVs. So I will say the government has been very supportive in terms of considering our proposals and having that discussion in terms of how we can grow e-mobility in the country.
Okay, so on taxes, what tax incentives or reforms would be most effective in accelerating EV adoption in Kenya?
First and foremost is to thank the government for the incentives we currently have. So when you look at 2023 Finance Act, which we still have today, it's VAT zero rating on buses, motorcycles, bicycles, lithium-ion batteries, and both VAT and excise duty, zero rating on VAT and zero excise duty. That has helped reduce the taxes on vehicles, which has helped reduce the cost of the product to consumers. So that has helped significantly, because when you look at 2023, where between 2022 and 2023, there was a 500% increment in terms of vehicles to about slightly over 4,000 vehicles. And between last year and this year, which is 2024, 2025, there was a 100% increment in terms of EVs in the country. And this is just from the taxes. The gaps that we see today are from that policies and the taxes that we have today. It is not including all the different categories of vehicles. So passenger vehicles are not included, light commercial vehicles are not included, heavy commercial vehicles are not included. So looking at how we can continue the discussion with the government to extend those fiscal incentives to other categories so that we can continue growing all the different categories of vehicles in the countries.
What role can the government play in driving or crowding in investments to support the growth of the e-mobility sector, including charging infrastructure and electrifying public transport?
I think the government has done a lot based on the incentives that we have today, but there's also more that we can get from the government, and our proposal basically will be on the white paper that we'll be publishing possibly this month. And looking at investment, we are looking at different organizations wanting to invest in the country. So number one, we need a stable fiscal regulatory space. So meaning that from a Finance Act, it's reviewed every year. So if we can have a stable moratorium where we actually have 3 years that we don't have to review these taxes for EVs, that will help create that stability that investors will look at investing in the country. Extending the fiscal incentives that we currently have to other vehicle categories. And I think those are the two main things that can help push investors and attract investors to the country.
Are there any successful international models for tax incentives or investments that Kenya can adapt to boost its e-mobility ecosystem?
There are different countries. We have Norway, we have India, Ethiopia, which is actually our neighbor. We have Rwanda, who have given significant tax incentives, and we've seen a significant growth in EVs. Using Rwanda as an example, where Ampersand was actually initially started, is they don't pay import duty, they don't pay VAT, and the growth of EVs in the country is significant in the last few years. Ethiopia, they've also put some incentives, and growth of EVs is significant in Ethiopia. So when you look at India, which is actually a huge manufacturer of motorcycles, they also, between 2015 and 2019, there was an incentive that was provided to manufacturers, to the consumers, which helped to kickstart the growth of EVs in those countries. We can point out to the e-mobility policy that was created. They did a consultative research on different countries and what they've done. And basically the policy was basically developed by looking at different countries and proposing what will help the EV growth. So I think when the policy is published, we'll actually give examples on these countries that was looked at, countries that we can use as examples to actually implement in our country to help the growth of EVs.
So on implementation and sector progression, what key areas within Kenya's e-mobility sector require more focus or investment to drive sustainable growth?
Which sectors to develop sustainable growth? I think e-mobility sits in a very tricky point, and you'll find organizations like ones doing two-wheelers, which is Ampersand, Rome, Spyro, Arkwright. They actually do end-to-end, meaning that they are building the infrastructure, they are assembling the motorcycles, they are basically building, they actually own the battery, and also there's a back-end side where they monitor the performance of the battery, of the motorcycle. And you can't put the cart before the horse. Ampersand found out real quick that when we built our first 3 stations and tried to sell motorcycles in the country, people are like, range anxiety becomes a big issue. So I think infrastructure will always come first before actually product itself. And you find that's a big inhibitor for growth of EVs in the country. So you'll find people will not buy vehicles because there's not enough charging infrastructure. You can't put so many buses on the road because the infrastructure has not been built. You can't put in an organization like Ampersand. For us to grow, we build the infrastructure before selling the motorcycles. So you find the investment required for all this organization is significantly high, and it starts from infrastructure. So I think that's one of the inhibitors for the growth of EVs in the country.
So, are there any current initiatives, partnerships, or programs you're excited about that signal positive momentum in Kenya's e-mobility journey?
I think the excitement that I have specifically this week is the partnership we have with KPLC, which is the distributor of electricity in the country, and the energy regulator, and the strong collaboration because they are our main source of energy. So the collaboration and the partnership we have with them has significantly helped us because number one, we start with they provided us a specific tariff. Remember, we have 0.2, and when we got the tariff in 2023, we were like 0.1% of the vehicle population in the country. So they've developed a specific e-mobility tariff, which we're actually using today. It is 16 shillings during peak hours, 8 shillings during off-peak hours. And we are still discussing with them in terms of, we do have a cap of 15,000 kilowatts per specific station. So our continued collaboration and partnership with them to discuss basically what they give us as an incentive and a specific tariff has significantly helped EVs grow in the country. So as they're revisiting and looking at revising the tariffs for implementation in 2026, that partnership and the discussion to ensure that they consider more reductions will help in terms of growth of EVs in the country in the future.
So, given EMAK's role at the intersection of industry, policy, and consumers, how is the association bridging the gap between innovators, regulators, and users?
What EMAK will be doing in the next few weeks is actually launching a strategy for the organization. And the organization basically will highlight in terms of what is our mission, what is our vision, what are our core values, and how we plan to actually close the gaps that we've identified as inhibitors or barriers for growth of EVs. So the policy will address in terms of how we will collaborate, who are our key partners, and how we will collaborate with them, our proposals in terms of how we can continue working with those key partners. And I think that will highlight and actually help us close those gaps. And then in addition to that is also raising funds for the E-Mobility Association of Kenya. And those funds will help in terms of adding more resources to the organization so that we can implement all the initiatives that we've identified on the strategy.
What does a well regulated, inclusive, and thriving e-mobility ecosystem look like to you?
My vision, personal vision, is looking at if everything was to be implemented, meaning that cabinet approves the e-mobility policy, parliament puts it into law and becomes an act. I foresee a significant investment in the EV space. We'll have a lot of players coming into the country. We'll have the existing companies growing significantly. We'll have manufacturing thriving in the country. Guys will actually be looking at local manufacturing, local assembly. And the focus that we have as EMAK is as we'll have 70,000 EV registration in 2030, which our calculation is will offtake a lot of curtailment, which is happening today with electricity. The focus is we'll have more than 200,000 EVs on the road. All this will be actually off-taking energy that is locally sourced. And I think the carbon emissions will reduce significantly. Drastic weather patterns will reduce significantly. I think we'll live a more healthier life in the next 5 years, meaning there's less carbon emissions. We will have less fuel imports, significant reduction in the fuel imports because EVs will be actually using the local energy. And most importantly is job opportunities in the country also, right? This is a new technology. We'll be employing guys manning our infrastructure. We'll have technicians doing battery repairs. We'll have assembly happening in the country. So job opportunities also for our younger brothers, our children, will actually grow significantly as we grow the EV space.
What advice would you give to policymakers and upcoming stakeholders in the sector?
I don't think I can give policymakers advice. All the request is actually to continue with the collaborative discussions we're having. It's just having us on the table to continue us discussing the EV space, the impact the industry will do to the country, changing policies to make it more attractive for investors to invest in the country. And I think with those collaborative efforts and partnership, we should see a significant growth in the country. So it's just continue what we are doing and putting us more on the table and continue with the discussions.
Hezbon offered a clear view of Kenya's evolving e-mobility policy landscape, highlighting tax incentives, efforts by E-Mobility Association of Kenya to close policy gaps, and the critical role of collaboration between government, industry, and civil society. Drawing from international examples and pointing to emerging partnerships, he shared a hopeful vision for a thriving e-mobility ecosystem taking shape in Kenya. Next, we hear from someone experiencing the electric transition firsthand, a female rider, Lilian Muyonga. Thank you for watching, and charge up for the next episode by subscribing to stay on the road with us.